Yeah.
Anyway, so let's talk about, and we're going to give you spoilers. Let's talk
this
right away.
discussion,
Spoilers.
by necessity, is going to contain spoilers because some of the issues
it's already out there.
with the movie.
Star Trek Into Darkness. Movie review with two of us. Cal Catmore's cards.
But
Star Trek.
Fair warning, we're going to be talking about probably even the ending of the movie and what happens in it. So stop now if you haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it.
You want to see it. Like, I managed to see it. All I'd ever seen was the teaser trailer. I knew nothing about the story, about the plot. I went into it cold. And it was a better movie for it, I think.
Star Trek Into Darkness.
So yeah, your thoughts on Star Trek Into Darkness.
Dun, 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 dun.
As you read in 3D into the camera.
3D. Oh, I saw the 2D one, actually.
Yeah.
The 3D one would have caused a headache. I don't normally get those unless it's 3D. So yeah, so Star Trek Into Darkness. Well, suffice it to say, it is not the Star Trek I grew up with, and that's certainly not the Star Trek my parents grew up with. My mom grew up with, you know.
Which is interesting because it harkens back to the Star Trek that your parents grew up on.
Except that
it's a retcon of like the original first.
Yeah, it's a retcon of the first take. Except I although I like the movie and everything, it's definitely my nephew Dan's generation, Y generation version. I liked it. It's a nice roller coaster ride. It ain't Star Trek, but it's a nice roller coaster ride. So it's like the premise of the film is that Captain Kirk, who is probably in his early 30s at this point,
like 30
somehow has commandeered the Enterprise and is now commander of it. And the story starts in medias res on this planet they call, for some reason, Nibiru. I'm going to blame that on David Limenoff because I figure he came up with that.
That's the sort of gag he would come up with.
See, Nibiru, that'd be clever. Like those Mayan people in Nibiru.
Yeah, and for some reason the Enterprise has to be underwater when they do this, even though it would be very simple for them to just stay in orbit and send a shuttle down. More to the point, there's this plot point that involves Spock going into a volcano to drop a little bomb package off to try and save the native people. Why did he have to do that?
They could have just thrown it into the volcano.
More to the point, they could have stayed in orbit and just beamed the bomb into the volcano.
Yeah, why did they make that needlessly complicated?
It was just like, hey, let's almost all get killed for the sake of a big action scene.
And then they were saying, they were commenting on the internet that allegedly Quinto got burned during that. A little bit on the back of his head during that scene.
I doubt it. There was no actual fire anywhere. It was
it's like, dude, really? That's got to be an urban legend.
They were filming in lava.
That's got to be an urban legend because I saw some of the pre-making stuff. I didn't know what the context was. I saw some of the pre-making stuff. I saw the part where they did the space barge, the fight with Cumberbatch on the space barge. And it was a green screen, and you couldn't tell who he was fighting. He's fighting this guy with black hair, you know.
Yeah.
They didn't want to show too much because they were going to give it away. And then they showed the volcano scene, which all they really showed was him standing on a green screen and then standing on a platform on a green screen. There was no fire. So that thing on the internet is BS because he never touched any fire.
An internet rumor about Star Trek not being true? I'm shocked.
So yeah, there's no fire involved at all.
But that brings us to
all CG.
One of the primary problems I had with the movie, and I want to have a little caveat up front. I fully understand and appreciate that it's not going to be the Star Trek I grew up with. I'm okay with that. I don't
Next Gen
mind
was not the Star Trek
they rebooted it. I really enjoyed the first of Abrams' movies. Even as I had some issues with it, what it felt to me was kind of like, okay, they've opened up a universe of possibilities. They've retconned it. They can do anything with Star Trek now. And these beloved characters, what are they going to do? And as we're watching this new movie, I couldn't help but feel like they had taken all of the promise of the first movie and kind of not done anything all that interesting with it. They sort of boiled down all of the stuff that I kind of had a problem with in the first movie and like focused exclusively on that and sort of just paid lip service to the stuff that made classic Trek and the original movies so much fun and have so much heart and soul. You know, like Well, put it this way. Classic Star Trek was always about philosophical and ethical conundrums. It was about exploration. It was about a sense of wonder having to do with humanity's place in the universe and our future in it. It was a show of wide-eyed optimism and philosophical discussions between the three lead characters. That was sort of the heart and soul of the show. The science fiction and the action adventure and all of that was sort of just like the frosting that made it, palatable. You wouldn't want to see three talking heads discussing this stuff, so put it in a sci-fi show and, give it this candy gloss of, fabulous backdrops of alien planets and cities and aliens.
They had to do that.
All of that cool stuff. The new stuff, the Abrams stuff, is like the opposite of that, in that they pay lip service to the philosophical conundrums and wide-eyed wonderment of the universe, but that's just the frosting on the real meat and potatoes of what's the new Star Trek is.
Candied potatoes.
Candied potatoes. Ooh, that would be sort of interesting. What these new Star Trek movies is, and what I think science fiction, one of the big problems with the genre is right now, it's become just a delivery system for adrenaline. It's all about the action set pieces. It's all about blowing up as much stuff as possible in the coolest way possible. So they use the Star Trek characters and sort of vaguely what Star Trek was originally about just as an excuse to get to the next big action set piece. So the thing with the volcano, again, there's no reason for them to be on the planet. There's no reason for the ship to be underwater. There's no reason for Kirk to go into their temple and mess with them and get them all to chase him for this big action scene with spears flying. None of that needed to be there because they have a ship that could have solved their problem from space. They didn't want to do that because it's really all about the action scene. So it's like, okay, here's these characters doing all these action scenes, but none of the heart and soul, or very little of it, coming through, in either the story or the characters. That's my take on it.
Yeah, part of the thing that's each Star Trek has tried to approach its era's particular modern foibles done in outer space is what Roddenberry was humanistically doing. During the first show, he would do stuff that dealt with Vietnam without saying it was Vietnam, saying it's Klingons or Romulans or aliens or whatever, and cowboys, and it was wagon train to the stars basically. That's what they cliched.
Yeah,
but
and that was the style of the time.
That was the thing that they did, and they could put a morality story in there. It would go right past the censors. They wouldn't want a censor to take it out. And in the 80s, Next Generation was a little lighter on that. But they did some episodes where they did morality stuff.
Actually, they did quite a bit. Next Gen, if you think about the core of Next Gen, it was always an ethical dilemma.
Yeah,
being put to the crew, usually the command crew, being faced with sort of a Sophie's choice of some kind, where it's like, okay, we need to save the planet, but in order to do it, we potentially destroy our principles or sacrifice an innocent alien over here or something. There would be like this, how do we resolve this? And the drama of it was based on how do we fix this problem without compromising who we are.
And it had already started to go a little downhill with Deep Space Nine did a lot of the more of the darker, dramatic war arcs and stuff. And
then interesting in its own
way. And then Voyager was sort of a lighter version of the whole thing with
Voyager was trying to be more of the pure exploration. It wasn't so much. I mean, they did a lot of ethical dilemma episodes.
It wasn't so much. But it was leaning toward more action.
It was leaning more action, and it was trying.
Enterprise was completely out there, except for the fourth season. And it's
fourth season got actually pretty interesting, but too little, too late at that point.
Too little, too late. It's interesting that the Abrams verse kind of follows the Enterprise series.
They reference it.
And they showed a ship there on the screen.
Which means even in the Abrams verse, Enterprise is canon.
Enterprise is canon. So the Dreadnought does look like the Chimera. I think that's pretty funny. Oh
yeah, it kind of does.
No, I didn't give him the design. But yeah, so it's the other way around. So the rest of the story, well, there is a dilemma in the story, but it's kind of hidden by all of the space stuff. Reading some of the reviews, apparently it was a parable about drone attacks thrown in there when they decide to fire the torpedoes at the Klingon Empire. and Scotty goes like, well, you shouldn't do that, or something to that effect. And,
yeah.
And they decide not to do that. Instead of doing that, they keep the drones and don't use them. Well, it sort of is, but sort of isn't.
I'd say they're reaching on that.
They're reaching, but...
really hard, actually. It's like they're trying to justify a storyline that's primarily about action.
Yeah.
If you think about it, and I had this thought after the movie, I was
torpedoes.
I'm entertained by this. It's a very well put together, slick, slam bang action movie.
It's a roller coaster ride.
Abrams is a consummate action director. He knows how to do that. And he's certainly smarter about using special effects than, say, Michael Bay is, where, he doesn't stop the movie cold to leer at them. He uses effects actually very well. A lot of times they're very subtle in the background. But the thing that I kept coming back to after I saw the movie was, I already saw this. It was the first Abrams Star Trek movie, in which a really formidable, unstoppable badass guy with a big kick-ass ship wants to take on the Enterprise and the Federation and destroy them for reasons having to do with like his personal angst over his family, and then they fight, and eventually the bad guy is defeated. They did that, and then they did it again, because I guess it worked so well the first time.
But then the first movie is a ripoff of Nemesis, which they did...
They were kind of trying to do Nemesis in the first one. So if you think about it, their take on Wrath of Khan, which is really what Into Darkness is trying mightily to remind you of it every turn. I mean, there are homages upon homages. There are scenes that are, garbled together, like so many homages. They've got, again, spoilers here. I'm assuming if you're still watching, you're past that. Like the scene where they invert the Spock death scene from Wrath of Khan, and now it's Kirk dying. An interesting twist, but then they shoehorn in Spock doing Kirk's Khan anger thing, and it comes out of nowhere for me, and I almost laughed. It's supposed to be like this big dramatic payoff, and I thought it was funny to see Zachary Quinto going Khan, because for one, it's still out of character for Spock. I know they were going for the whole his emotions are breaking through thing, but here's the thing: that scene was supposed to be the big tearjerker, oh my god, I'm broken up inside scene. They had already given away their get-out-of-jail-free card just like 5 minutes earlier with the, "That's funny, this tribble's coming back to life because of Khan's blood that I stuck in it." Well, that certainly is an obvious foreshadowing for some character dying and being brought back to life in 5 minutes. So the whole time that Kirk is dying, yeah, it's a well-written scene. The acting is good. I'm not a big fan of the Khan, but, be that as it may. It's a good scene. But the whole time I'm supposed to be crying, and I'm not, because all I can think is they're going to bring him back to life in 5 minutes with a shot of Khan's blood, and sure enough, that's exactly what they do. So there's no suspense. You're not really emotionally involved. You're just sort of appreciating how clever it is. Like, ooh, they did a clever twist on this other movie that they're trying really hard to remind you, like, remember this scene? Remember how moved you were by it, like, way back in the early 80s when this came out?
Ironically, though...
Here it is again, but more clever and twisty and with better effects. But with none of the emotional resonance. And that's the problem I keep coming back to with it. It's like, I admire the movie for its craftsmanship, but I wasn't emotionally involved with it at all.
I found the roller coaster ride thing, I found that it was trying to do Space Heat and Wrath of Khan together. It was sort of like, I thought of it as a very
weird,
really well-crafted fanfic.
Yeah, it was like a fan film.
A fan film, both of them are.
With huge budgets.
With huge budgets. It's like they gave Abrams essentially the carte blanche that they should have given us 15 years ago and let us do a Star Trek movie. So
we had to make our own.
Yeah. They're coming soon. Shameless plug. Next December. And they decided to do this fan film and to pay homage to the other stuff. So even though they retconned the universe, and I like the movie too, but it was not Star Trek.
Yeah, it was space adventure with characters named Kirk and Spock.
I wasn't as broken up as Joe Kreisman, who's doing his own fanfic thing, and he wants it to look exactly like the 60s. But as I pointed out to Brian Story in a blog, our space fan, our resident Star Wars / Star Trek background guy, consultant, as I pointed out to Mr. Story, I said they couldn't do the 60s Star Trek now. Nobody would watch it. I mean, really, if you if you made everything perfect, like New Voyages or whatever, and you had Paramount take New Voyages or one of the other ones, or take Excalibur and do that, and it wasn't a fan film, it was a Paramount picture, nobody would sit through that.
I would.
You would get just us and some other
You'd get
older
the old
fans.
school fans,
but you wouldn't get any new people.
Yeah.
And I think what Abrams' people has tapped into, and I'm not just being an Abrams lover, but it's to say that they've tapped into the next generation. They've made a movie that even with all that hyperactivity and ADD and people going on all over, it catches them. It pulls them in, even though it's not really, it gets them. It gets them.
But that's where I'm a little more cynical about it. I would agree with you. It hooks you. It moves like a house on fire. It's a ridiculously entertaining movie. It pulls you in, and then it gives you nothing but junk calories that you forget after you've seen it. It's got everything but the heart and soul that makes it worth telling in the first place. All you get out of this new movie is a whole bunch of slam-bang action scenes that look really awesome, and a iconic villain who is reduced in this movie to just being a slick terrorist, badass guy who's... I mean, I love Cumberbatch, don't get me wrong. He's a terrific actor. I love Sherlock. I was stoked when they cast him. But you compare his take on the character, and it's not really his, it's the writers and the director telling him what to do. But Cumberbatch's Khan is not Khan at all. The whole point of Montalban's Khan, in Space Seed in particular, but also Wrath of Khan, he was seductive, he was charming, he was dangerous, he was like a devil, seducer.
Yeah, he wasn't just a terrorist guy that blew up stuff.
He didn't need to punch people 50 feet through the air.
He was manipulative, he was sneaky.
He seduces one of Kirk's crew into joining him as a lover, and she compromises her principles, and that was Khan. That's why he was interesting in the first place. Just having this slick, random, completely generic, badass ninja assassin guy and calling him Khan doesn't make him Khan, and it doesn't make me care anymore about him.
Done. I think they should have just said that this guy is not Khan. He's just one of the augments.
But then you don't even have that in the story. It's just Star Trek with random badass.
I guess that's why they didn't do it.
That's why they wanted Khan in the story, and they did everything except make you care that it was Khan.
And what's weird is they had this massive, blanketing, secretive ad campaign to keep you from telling that it was Khan.
And I didn't know going into it, actually.
But when they mentioned Benicio del Toro, I said, "Oh shit, Khan's going to be in the movie somewhere."
But then they ended up.
But then they said Cumberbatch, but I said, "Nah, Khan's still going to be in the movie."
Yeah.
They're just going to say
again,
Cumberbatch.
It's weird having. I know it's supposed to be like the same universe, but that is so not Khan. I mean.
Not even
okay, I'm old school. I've got
him,
Montalban burned into my brain. I saw Star Trek II in the theater when I was a little kid. It blew me away.
I was 11. That was an awesome submarine battle. Great.
Okay, so Cumberbatch doesn't look or feel anything like Montalban. But that shouldn't matter. It's how the character's written. And in my book, the character is just not written with any real personality or charisma particularly, except what Cumberbatch himself brings to it as a good actor. But the part, he's just a random threat. He has no pull. He's not magnetic particularly because the story doesn't give him anything other than lip service to, I'm doing it all for my family because I'm... Now that gives me an excuse to have a tear run down my cheek, and that's like their substitute for character development and emotional involvement. But the movie doesn't earn it. And I tell you what I think the ultimate problem here is. It's Abrams. I mean, some of it's Kurtzman and Aricci's writing.
Well, those are the guys that wrote Transformers.
Yeah, exactly. And they're clever writers. They can do a good job. I liked the first Abrams movie more so than Into Darkness. But you put somebody in charge who, by his own acknowledgement, he seems kind of proud of this, actually, in interviews, he didn't like Star Trek. He hated it. He didn't grow up loving it, so he had to be sort of won over by it. And that only happened when, again, by his admission, he figured out a way to turn it into a J.J. Abrams movie. Which means lots of slant... Yeah, he wanted to do a big, kind of dumbed-down action-adventure thing with these iconic characters sort of paying lip service to them, but not really getting what made them sizzle in the first place. So Abrams turned it into any other generic, high-budget, summer action-adventure science fiction movie. And it's making a ton of money. It will revitalize the franchise, but it's no longer my Star Trek. It's no longer anything that I connect with, other than I find it entertaining because it's well-done action. But you put somebody in charge like Abrams, who doesn't have that core affection, who wasn't a little kid huddling under a blanket, watching the TV with a bowl of cereal, watching Trouble with Tribbles and having a great old time, you're going to get something like the new movies, which are slick and cold and kind of heartless. That's my take on it.
Yes. So the basic synopsis of the story boils down to this sort of weird conspiracy, which is very similar to some of the ones I put in Starcrackers. Very, very similar. And I did not have connection to Abrams than them, but yeah, we've thought of this before. We thought of this in Silly Track, and Cumberbatch's character, to me, was kind of more like maybe one of Libyan's minions, who.
He should have been playing the Libyan.
The Libyan, yeah. I saw he should have been the Libyan.
That would have been awesome.
That would have, yeah. I mean, they paid homage to our Apple scene in the first one, so now they got the Libyan. They have the Overlord in it, essentially. It's like, there he is.
Actually, you know who Cumberbatch should have been playing? Raxler.
Actually, Raxler had more charisma, I think.
Well, Cumberbatch has charisma. They just didn't give him a whole lot to do with it. He's playing Khan, who, if you remember from Space Seed and Wrath of Khan, he's
apparently Abrams doesn't.
Charming, magnetic character. He's this dynamo of seductive power, and in this one,
you can't expect a British
sort of
guy
a badass ninja.
You can't expect a British guy to be a swarthy Latin lover.
Sure, I can. The problem is not Cumberbatch. He's a terrific actor. I got nothing but praise for the man. And I think what good in the role is there is
not something that the Brits are doing.
Well, it's the take on the character that they came up with. They wanted an imposing, slick badass. And that's what they got. That's all they got from watching Wrath of Khan, apparently, is that Khan was a really formidable, apparently just physical threat. There's no battle of wills. You watch the original Wrath of Khan, it's a naval battle. It's all about tactics and psyching each other out and double crossing and all of this stuff going on. And in this one, it's literally who can punch the hardest is what determines the big outcome of the movie. The movie literally ends with a freaking fist fight. A cowboy showdown on a space barge a la Star Wars between Spock, who, if you remember in the original show, did not spend a lot of time punching people out, and Khan, who in this one is revealed to have the ability to punch people like 50 feet backwards through the air, because now apparently he's like, Superman. And they're literally just punching each other until one of them is knocked unconscious. And that's their idea of a big, satisfying, climactic showdown. And then at the end of that, they don't even kill the guy because they need to keep his character around for potential sequel setup. So you don't even get a satisfying conclusion like in Wrath of Khan, where he blows himself the hell up. In a final act of stabbing at thee from hell's heart. In this you get, oh, my arm broke. Oh, I guess I'm unconscious.
Actually, that's it. Chick shot him.
And she shot him a bunch of times to no effect. It was all just about a fight scene. That's all they thought of. That's the best they could come up with. I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. Because, again, with the first Abrams movie, there was so much they could have done. There was so much wide open. And this is what apparently the big game plan was. Let's just make it be sort of like Transformers, but like with Star Trek characters.
I think the problem may have come along with the premise that Hollywood cannot, for the life of it, come up with an original idea.
They can.
Hollywood
just don't want to.
They want to bank on the stuff that everybody's familiar with somewhere else, so they just want to keep doing Star Trek 2 over and over again for all eternity. Mm-hmm. And it's like, they can't think of a completely new villain, or have it not even be a villain. Have them discover the oil probe early or something.
Yeah, but
they can't even do that.
The thing is, they can, but they have no incentive to. Because I guarantee you, these new Star Trek, I guess this one isn't doing quite as well as the last one, but it's going to make hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's why these movies exist in the first place. It's like the producers
no one even was watching.
We need another $700 million hit, make another one of those, and make sure you do it exactly like the last one.
11 years ago, Nemesis came out, nobody was in the theater.
Well,
nobody was watching Star Trek Nemesis.
Yeah, part of that was because the movie series had kind of broken down at that point. Like it had become,
Enterprise was in the middle of its run. And
yeah, Star Trek at that point was only for insiders. Like the movies had no crossover appeal. You could
and the ad campaigns were terrible. Enterprise kept advertising itself like it was a sex show or a wrestling match every week. It's like, it wasn't even about that.
But that's exactly what we're talking about. That's why they advertised it like that, because they were thinking, if we show it to be even remotely cerebral, nobody will watch. It's all about the TNA and the explosions and the boobies and the sparks. So that's what they showed you, and then the episodes were usually not about that at all.
So Enterprise got canceled.
But they knew even then, it was like, okay, we have to present this like it's really dumbed down, which I find very insulting, personally, as a person who, I'm not like some kind of super genius, but it's like, I can tell when my intelligence is being insulted, and I kind of feel like that's the mentality that's in charge of Hollywood right now, and probably always has been. But it's just like, there's no room for intelligent science fiction anymore. And I miss that. Yeah. I really do. Where's the 2001s of this generation?
Wow. So, yeah, the Abrams movie, yeah, I mean...
it didn't stink. That's the thing. Stink. It was entertaining. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I saw it. I didn't hate it.
Dan
hasn't
seen it.
Like Prometheus was like an embarrassment, you know. This was like exactly what it was trying to be, which was a big, slick, loud action movie. It succeeded on that level, and I was entertained by it. I was pulled along with it. It's good acting. Abrams is a smart director, and he's a talented director. He has a singular vision. The problem is, I don't really share his vision of what Star Trek should be. And that's the big disconnect. I'm telling you right now, JJ, you're not fooling me, anyway, with the Leonard from Big Bang Theory hair and hipster glasses. You're not really a nerd. Joss Whedon is a legitimate nerd. He comes by it honestly. You, I think it's a cynical affectation. You have Michael Bay tendencies. You're pretending to be a nerd as part of the marketing for these sci-fi movies that you find yourself oh so lucratively making. By your own admission, you didn't even like this stuff growing up.
Michael Bay didn't like Transformers.
You're not really a nerd. Just saying. Calling you out, dude.
Like some of those girls at the cons that were ridiculously hot, they're not nerds either. Anyway.
Well, they might be. I don't know. Maybe they're socially awkward.
No, some of them. Neil Patrick. Okay. So yeah, that's a stretch that the torpedoes were about drones or whatever, but I don't buy that necessarily. But I mean, and Scotty going, oh, but it would be typical of Abrams to do something like that, to say, let's create an emotional moment that really has no substance. Mm-hmm. Let's just like say, ooh, Scotty's mad about the torpedoes, therefore they must be bad.
A good framework he delivers scenes that are meaty for the actors.
The sick kid has to be healed, and then for some unknown reason, the black guy has to do a terrorist act.
Yeah, you wonder,
he didn't really have to.
What hold over the father guy did Khan have at that point? He'd already healed the kid. So
he
like the father guy should have just said, yeah, sure, give me the explosive ring. I'll totally go downtown and blow up the building just like you said, and then go right to Starfleet security and say, this guy just told me to blow up headquarters, here's a bomb. You know, and they could have arrested him. I don't understand why. I mean, okay, maybe there was like some convoluted subplot that got cut out there, but it's just sort of an example of like something that doesn't really make sense if you stop and think about it, but it led to a really kick-ass explosion and kick-started all the pew-pew-kaplowy.
But well, one of the things that's really, I can't really say is bothersome because we did it, is that when we were in high school and college, is that Kirk and crew are too damn young to be in command of the Enterprise. They just are. They're too young. They just got out of Starfleet, and there they are in command of the Enterprise.
Flagship of the Federation.
Really?
Kirk's going to be captain, unproven. He's never been XO on any...
And then they kind of addressed that in this movie and said, oh, he screwed up on Nero and stuff.
And the response, of course, should be like,
blows it
duh, of course he wasn't ready. He's like barely 30. Of course he doesn't know how to captain a ship yet.
And it's like, yeah, we did that in Silly Track, but we were kidding.
Well, the thing is, we were kids.
We were that age.
We thought that 30 was old. We thought 30, you should be like an admiral by then. So it's like, we had space captains being like in their 20s. We just didn't think about it. We didn't know. There's new movies, I think they know. And
they should know.
But they've retconned the universe and sort of painted themselves into a corner. They're like, okay, we're doing Star Trek over again. It's the same crew, same characters. but we've kind of made it so that like we've pushed them too soon into being like on the Enterprise. They shouldn't be there yet, so they just are anyway. Just don't worry about it.